First Contact Surprise. The Galactic Assembly's exploration vessel, Eternal Wisdom, hung in high Earth orbit, its crystalline surface refracting sunlight in ways that made it nearly invisible to the naked eye. Inside, Chief Observer Zex 427 viewed the latest analysis of human civilization with growing concern. Their mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation among the Arcturian species. Impossible, they chittered, causing their junior analyst to step back instinctively. Run the calculations again. I have. Chief Observer. 17 times, replied Analyst Ven, their bioluminescent patches pulsing with anxiety. The humans are achieving quantum coherence in their brains, not artificially, naturally. The implications were staggering. Every spacefaring race had discovered quantum computing eventually, building massive facilities to maintain the delicate quantum states needed for advanced calculations. But achieving it biologically, it should be impossible at anything above near absolute zero temperatures. Yet somehow, human brains were doing exactly that. At room temperature, the Eternal Wisdom had arrived 3 standard cycles ago to evaluate humanity for potential membership in the Galactic Assembly. It was supposed to be routine. Humans had barely mastered crude fusion drives, and their first colony on Mars was still heavily dependent on Earth. By all normal metrics, they were centuries away from being considered a spacefaring civilization. But then the scanning team had detected the quantum signatures. Have they noticed? Zex 427 asked, their crystalline exoskeleton shifting colors with concern. No, Chief Observer. They appear entirely unaware of their capability. Their quantum physics research is primitive. They're still arguing about whether quantum effects can occur in biological systems. A holo display showed humans going about their daily lives in a city below. Walking, talking, their brains constantly performing calculations that should require near absolute zero temperatures and massive support systems. The assembly must be informed, Zex 427 decided. But first, we need to understand the extent of this ability. The next day, Dr. Sarah Chen stood in her university's quantum computing lab, staring at the alien delegation with a mixture of confusion and excitement. The Arcturian had requested a tour of Earth's quantum computing facilities, but seemed more interested in her team's failed biological quantum coherence experiments than their actual quantum computer. You say these tests showed no quantum coherence in the neural tissue samples? Zex 427 asked, studying the cryo chamber where they'd attempted to maintain quantum states in synthetic neural networks. None we could detect, Sarah admitted. We've had to maintain temperatures below 0.1 Kelvin to get any quantum effects at all. The biological noise at room temperature makes it impossible. She trailed off as she noticed the aliens exchange meaningful looks. Is something wrong? Dr. Chen, Zex 427 said carefully, would you be willing to participate in a simple experiment? We have some scanning equipment we'd like to use. What followed would change humanity's understanding of themselves forever. The Arcturian scanners revealed what human technology couldn't yet detect. Their brains were performing quantum computations constantly, maintaining coherence at temperatures where it should be impossible. But how? Sarah asked, staring at the readings in disbelief. This violates everything we know about quantum decoherence. That, Zex 427 replied, is exactly what we need to understand, because it may explain many things about your species that have puzzled us. Your intuitive leaps. Your ability to find solutions that seem to come from nowhere. Your minds are performing quantum calculations without you even being aware of it. As news of the discovery spread, humanity faced a startling reality. They weren't primitive at all. They were doing something the most advanced races in the galaxy had never managed. Something they'd all assumed was impossible, and they'd been doing it since before they invented the wheel. The Assembly's evaluation mission had turned into something else entirely. They weren't here to judge humanity's readiness for membership anymore. They were here because humanity had accidentally mastered something that could revolutionize the galaxy, And as ZEX 427 wrote in their report that evening, they achieved this not through technology or deliberate effort, but through evolution. The implications are both thrilling and terrifying. What else might humans be capable of, given time and awareness of their true abilities? And more importantly, are we ready for the changes they will bring to our carefully ordered galaxy? The report would sit unfinished on their terminal that night, as alarms began blaring throughout the eternal wisdom. Something was happening in a research facility on Mars, something that would prove that quantum coherence was just the beginning of humanity's impossible abilities. The challenge. The Mars Research Facility's emergency signal pulsed through space, reaching Earth and the eternal wisdom simultaneously. Dr. James Martinez, lead researcher at the Quantum Telecommunications Lab, had achieved something that should have been impossible, again. The HFY delegation arrived to find the facility in chaos, but not from disaster. Screens displayed data that had ZEX 427's crystalline structure shifting through colors so rapidly it nearly strobed. Dr. Martinez stood in the center of it all, grinning like someone who'd just discovered their childhood dreams were real. "It's not just our brains," he announced without preamble. "We've been looking at quantum entanglement all wrong. The whole time, we thought we needed to create and maintain it. But it's already there. We just needed to learn to see it." Sarah Chen, who had accompanied the HFY delegation, stepped forward. "James, what are you talking about?" He gestured to a simple device on the table, crude by galactic assembly standards. "Remember how our brains perform quantum calculations without supercooling? I wondered, what if that's not unique to neural tissue? What if we've been making it too complicated?" The device hummed softly, connected to another identical unit in a lab on Earth. According to everything the HFY knew, it should have been impossible for such a simple machine to maintain quantum entanglement. The temperature was too high, the shielding too basic, the distance too great. But the data was undeniable. The devices were communicating instantaneously across space, using quantum entanglement maintained at room temperature. "How?" Venn asked, their bioluminescence flickering with confusion. "Every race in the assembly has tried to develop room temperature quantum technologies. The physics make it impossible." "That's just it," Martinez interrupted excitedly. "We were all trying to force quantum states to exist in our conditions. But what if quantum entanglement is the natural state of the universe? What if entropy and decoherence are what we should be treating as the anomalies?" Sarah's eyes widened as she followed his logic. "Like our brains, we weren't creating quantum coherence. We evolved to use what was already there." The implications hit ZEX 427 like a gravitational wave. If Martinez was right, it wouldn't just revolutionize communications. It would upend the fundamental understanding of physics that the Galactic Assembly had built over millennia. But before they could process this, another alarm sounded. This one came from the eternal wisdom itself. Long-range sensors had detected something approaching from the outer solar system, something that shouldn't exist. A ship, moving faster than light, without a drive system. "That's impossible," Venn whispered, forgetting in their shock that this word had already lost much of its meaning where humans were concerned. The vessel was small, clearly human-made, and according to every instrument, it was utilizing quantum fields that stretched across space itself. Fields that, according to Martinez's theory, had always been there, waiting to be used. Captain Lisa Wong's voice crackled through the quantum comm device. "Mars facility, this is the test vessel Quantum Dream. You're not going to believe what we found out here." As they listened to her report, even the humans seemed stunned by what they'd discovered. The quantum fields that permeated space weren't just passive phenomenon. They were a network, a web of connections that linked everything in the universe. And humanity, with their quantum-sensitive brains, had unconsciously been sensing it all along. "It explains so much," Sarah breathed. "Scientific intuition, quantum tunneling at room temperature, even some of the phenomena we dismissed as pseudoscience. We were detecting these fields without understanding what we were sensing." Zex 427 watched as the humans quickly began theorizing ways to apply this knowledge, their excitement building with each new possibility they conceived. The Arcturian observer realized that the assembly had made a crucial mistake in their initial assessment of humanity. They hadn't found a primitive species needing guidance. They'd found one that saw the universe in a fundamentally different way, a way that might well prove to be more accurate than the assembly's carefully constructed theories. As the Quantum Dream docked with the Mars facility, Zex 427 composed an urgent message to the assembly. The humans weren't just doing the impossible. They were redefining what possibility meant, and the galaxy would never be the same. The real question now was, how would the assembly react to discovering that their most fundamental scientific principles might be wrong? And more importantly, what would humanity do with their newfound understanding of the universe? The answer would come sooner than anyone expected, as a crisis in the Carina sector would force both humanity and the assembly to face the implications of this paradigm shift. Ripples of change. The Carina sector crisis wasn't supposed to be humanity's problem. 30,000 light-years from Earth, the region had been a disputed territory between three assembly species for centuries. But now, as the Quantum Dream's revolutionary drive technology spread throughout human space, distance had become a very different concept. Admiral Helena Santos stood on the bridge of the Earth ship Paradigm, watching the quantum field display that showed the complex web of connections holding the universe together. To her quantum-sensitive human brain, now enhanced by Martinez's detection technology, it looked like a vast neural network, synapses of reality itself firing across space and time. Another refugee ship detected, her sensor officer reported. Quantum signature matches Mareth design. The Mareth were one of the three species fighting over the Carina sector. Their sun was dying centuries ahead of predictions, forcing them to abandon their homeworld. The other two species, the Vex and the Kalari, had seized the opportunity to claim disputed territories, turning a diplomatic tension into a humanitarian crisis. How many aboard? Helena asked, though she already knew the answer would be heartbreaking. 12,000, Admiral. Life support failing. They're using outdated FTL drives. They'll never reach safe space in time. Helena nodded, having expected this. The assembly's conventional FTL technology, while impressive, was too slow for evacuation on this scale. But humanity's quantum network drives, that was a different story. Send the quantum entanglement protocols, she ordered. Let's show them what impossible looks like. On the refugee ship's bridge, Captain Ixel of the Mareth watched in disbelief as strange energy patterns emerged around his vessel. His fur stood on end as reality seemed to shift, and suddenly his ship was moving through space in a way their finest scientists had claimed couldn't work. The journey that would have taken months was over in minutes. His ship, along with thousands of his people, now safely orbited a habitable world in neutral space. Back in the crisis zone, the Paradigm's intervention had not gone unnoticed. Assembly ships from both the Vex and Kalari fleets approached, their commanders demanding explanations. "This is Overseer Kem of the Vex Dominion," a harsh voice transmitted. "Your interference in regional affairs violates assembly protocol. Withdraw immediately." Helena smiled, a gesture that her human crew recognized, but the aliens might not understand. "Overseer, I'm transmitting data packets to both your fleets. They contain the basic principles of quantum network navigation, freely given, no strings attached." The silence that followed was profound. In assembly space, advanced technology was never shared without extensive negotiations and agreements. It was simply not done. "You? What?" Kem's voice had lost its authoritative edge. "The universe doesn't belong to any one species," Helena replied. "Neither does the truth about how it works. The quantum network has always been there. We're just the first to notice it. It wouldn't be right to keep that knowledge to ourselves." On the Eternal Wisdom, still orbiting Earth, Zex 427 watched the transmissions with growing fascination. Humanity wasn't just changing the galaxy's technology. They were challenging its most basic assumptions about how civilizations should interact. They're giving away technological advantages freely, Venn observed, their bioluminescence pulsing with confusion. The assembly's entire economic structure is based on technological exchange protocols. Perhaps, Zex 427 replied. That's exactly what needs to change. The impact of humanity's approach spread faster than anyone could have predicted. Within days, ships throughout the sector were attempting to access the quantum network. Some succeeded, others failed, but the very attempt was forcing species to cooperate in unprecedented ways. The Mareth's quantum-enhanced sensors soon discovered why their sun was dying prematurely, and more importantly, how to prevent the same fate befalling other stars. The Vex and Kalari, faced with both new technology and a solution to the region's instability, found their reasons for conflict diminishing. But not everyone welcomed these changes. In the Assembly's central chambers, ancient powers were stirring. Species that had maintained their influence through technological superiority for millennia saw their advantages evaporating. The humans hadn't just challenged physics, they'd challenged the very foundations of galactic society. As reports flooded in from across assembly space of ships accessing the quantum network, of centuries-old problems being solved through this new understanding of reality, a coalition of conservative species called for an emergency session. Humanity, they argued, was destabilizing the careful order of galactic civilization. They needed to be stopped, or at least controlled, before they changed too much, too quickly. They had no way of knowing that events in their own capital system would soon make such debates irrelevant. For the quantum network humanity had discovered wasn't just a means of transportation or communication. It was trying to tell them something urgent. The breaking point. Dr. Sarah Chen stood before the Assembly's Emergency Council, facing representatives of over 300 species. The Grand Chamber, designed to showcase the Assembly's power and antiquity, now felt less impressive than it had just months ago. Perhaps because she now sensed the quantum connections flowing through everything, making even the most ornate structures seem like temporary arrangements of fundamentally connected matter. The quantum network is alive, she announced, her voice carrying through the vast space. Or perhaps more accurately, it's conscious. The chamber erupted in overlapping translations and exclamations. Sarah waited, knowing that what came next would be even more difficult for them to accept. In the week since the first signal had been detected, everything had changed. It began with patterns in the quantum field that couldn't be explained by natural phenomena. Then came the symmetries, mathematical sequences that couldn't be coincidental. Finally, there were the dreams. Every human with quantum sensitivity had started experiencing them. Images, equations, concepts that seemed to come from the network itself. At first, they thought it was a side effect of their enhanced connection to the quantum fields. Then they realized it was trying to communicate. The network maintains quantum coherence across the universe, Sarah continued once the chamber quieted. It processes information. It thinks. And it's been trying to warn us. High Counselor Vexith, a member of the Conservative Coalition, rose from their gravity pad. Warning us about what exactly? The universe is dying, Sarah replied. Not in the heat-death way we expected, but something more immediate. There's a breakdown occurring in the quantum framework of reality itself. We wouldn't have noticed it without accessing the network, but now that we can see it. She paused, looking around the chamber. We have perhaps 30 years before it reaches critical failure. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the Assembly's perpetual background hum seemed muted. Impossible, someone whispered, though the word had lost much of its power since humanity's arrival on the galactic stage. The network has been trying to communicate this for millennia, Sarah explained. It's why human brains evolved quantum sensitivity. It's been subtly guiding our development, helping us reach the point where we could understand its warnings. And we're not the only ones. She gestured to the Mareth delegation. Your son's premature decay. It's a symptom. The quantum framework in your system is deteriorating faster than average. There are others. Images appeared in the chamber's holographic display. Star systems across the galaxy showing similar signs of quantum instability. The patterns formed a spreading web of decay that, once seen, was impossible to ignore. "This is absurd," Vexith declared. "You expect us to believe that not only is the quantum substrate of reality conscious, but it chose humanity as its messenger." Not just humanity. A new voice spoke. Zex 427 stepped forward, their crystalline form refracting light in complex patterns. "My species has been receiving fragments of these messages for generations. We interpreted them as religious visions, but now they displayed readings from their own quantum sensors. The patterns match. We simply lack the context to understand them." Other species began speaking up. The Mareth, the Kalari, even some of the Assembly's oldest members. Each had their own stories of inexplicable quantum phenomena, of patterns they'd dismissed or misinterpreted. "The network didn't choose humanity," Sarah corrected. "It's been reaching out to all of us. We just happened to be the first to recognize it for what it was. And now we need to work together, because fixing this will require something unprecedented." She took a deep breath. The quantum network isn't just a communication medium or a transportation system. It's the foundation of consciousness itself, not just organic consciousness, but universal consciousness, and it's asking for our help. The implication slowly dawned on the assembled representatives. This wasn't just about saving their civilization, or even their species. This was about preserving the very fabric of conscious reality. "What do you propose?" the Assembly's prime speaker asked, their ancient voice carrying the weight of millennia. "Something impossible," Sarah smiled. "We need to rewrite the quantum foundation of the universe itself, and we need to do it together." As if in response to her words, the quantum network pulsed, sending ripples of connection through every quantum-sensitive being in the chamber. The message was clear. Time was running out. In orbit above, the quantum dream sensors detected something new. A fluctuation in the quantum fields that suggested the decay was accelerating. What they had thought would take decades might instead happen much sooner. The race to save reality itself had begun. Legacy of the impossible. The quantum decay reached critical levels far sooner than anyone had predicted. 6 months after Sarah Chen's address to the Assembly, reality itself began to fray at the edges. Stars flickered as quantum coherence failed. Entire systems reported distortions in space-time that threatened to tear them apart. But in those 6 months, something unprecedented had occurred. The Assembly, humanity, and every spacefaring race had united in ways previously unimaginable. The quantum network that connected all consciousness had become their shared laboratory, their common ground, their collective mind. Admiral Helena Santos stood on the Paradigm's bridge, watching the largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history. Ships of every species stretched across the quantum field display, each connected to the others through the network humanity had discovered. They weren't just ships anymore. They were nodes in the largest quantum computer ever conceived. "All vessels report ready," her communications officer announced. "The Arcturi calculation arrays are synchronized. Mareth energy conduits are at full capacity. The Vex probability engines are spooled up." Helena nodded, then opened a channel to the fleet. "This is Admiral Santos. Combat intelligence reports we have less than 6 hours before quantum coherence fails completely. Everything we've worked for comes down to this moment." On Earth, in the combined laboratories of 100 species, Dr. James Martinez and Zex 427 made final adjustments to their impossible device. It wasn't large. It didn't need to be. Size was irrelevant when you were working with the fundamental fields of reality. "The quantum network is ready," Martins reported. "It's excited. I don't know how else to describe it." Zex 427's crystalline form pulsed with colors that had no name in human languages. "We all feel it. The network knows what we're attempting." What they were attempting was, by any rational standard, insane. They plan to use the combined processing power of every quantum-sensitive brain in the galaxy, amplified by the assembled fleet's technology, to rewrite the quantum foundations of reality itself. Not just patch the decay, but fundamentally alter how the universe maintained coherence. The calculations are impossible. Vexith had argued in the final planning session. The variables are infinite. Good thing we're not just doing calculations, Sarah Chen had replied. We're asking the universe itself to help us save it. Now, as the moment of truth approached, every quantum-sensitive being in the galaxy prepared themselves. Humans, Arcturi, Murith, and dozens of other species who had discovered their own connection to the quantum network. They would serve as the bridges between conventional technology and the conscious quantum field that underpinned reality. Signal from Earth, Helena's comm officer reported. They're initiating the sequence. The device Martins and Zex 427 had built began to pulse with quantum energy. Through the network, Helena felt it, felt the power building, the connection strengthening. Every ship in the fleet became a focal point, channeling energy in ways that defied conventional physics. The quantum network's consciousness touched their minds, not in words, but in pure mathematical truth. It showed them what needed to be done, how the varied framework of reality could be restructured to prevent decay. We're seeing coherence failures in sectors 7 through 12, someone reported. Reality is starting to break down. All ships, Helena commanded, execute Quantum Protocol Omega on my mark. In that moment, as reality itself hung in the balance, humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy proved not to be their technology or their quantum sensitivity. It was their willingness to attempt the impossible, to face universe-ending disaster with innovation and hope. Mark. The power of 1,000,000 ships, the processed thoughts of billions of quantum-sensitive minds, and the consciousness of the universe itself merged into a single purpose. Through the network, they could feel reality shifting, restructuring, healing. The laws of physics themselves were being rewritten, not through brute force, but through a deeper understanding of the quantum consciousness that had always been there, waiting to be recognized. When it was over, when the quantum field stabilized, and the readings showed that the decay had been not just stopped but reversed, there was a moment of universal silence. Every being connected to the network felt it, the gratitude of reality itself. Zex 427, speaking to the assembly a week later, summed up what they had learned. We thought consciousness was something that emerged from complexity. Instead, we discovered that consciousness is fundamental to reality itself. The universe is not just alive, it is life itself. And humanity helped us all remember how to talk to it. The changes didn't stop there. The quantum network, now stable and fully awakened, opened up possibilities that even humanity hadn't imagined. Species that had never been able to communicate began to understand each other on fundamental levels. Technology that had seemed thousands of years away became possible through direct communion with the quantum consciousness of reality. But perhaps the most profound change was in how the galaxy's civilizations viewed the concept of impossible. As Sarah Chen noted in her memoirs, we learned that impossible isn't a scientific term, it's a failure of imagination. And imagination, we discovered, is just another word for quantum consciousness touching infinity. The word impossible remained in the galaxy's languages, but it had gained a new meaning. Now, when someone said something was impossible, it wasn't a barrier to be stopped by. It was an invitation to prove that with enough creativity, cooperation, and courage, even the laws of reality themselves could be rewritten. And somewhere in the quantum network that connected all things, the consciousness of the universe continued its eternal dance, no longer alone in its awareness of the infinite possibilities that existed in every moment of existence.